Hi, this is Diego Otegui again. In this opportunity, I'm going to be addressing probably the one topic that is most dear to me because it has been my main area of research for the last, I would say, 15 years. Maybe less than that, but actually, it started being an interest in my professional life in when I was in East Timor in 2001. So I have been working around this idea of local systems and the importance of local systems for the last 20, 40 years. Um, I think that I would start by the most boring aspect of my work when it comes to local systems. For those of you that do not know much about me, I wrote an article about the possibility and the benefits of including violent gangs in the efforts of those of us involved in humanitarian action or emergency management, and this particularly applied to the Latin American context. And the reason why I started doing that research and why I wrote that paper, and and that was while I was doing my doctoral dissertation, which is the fact that increasingly, especially in the humanitarian side of things, humanitarian actors started to realize that the work that they were doing or we were doing, because I was part of that movement, if you will, back then, was not as easy and was not as beneficial, and it was not as straightforward as everybody believed it was. So essentially, in the very beginning, once a disaster happened, the idea was that you needed some external people that were ready and were capable to go into the location that had been impacted by whatever disaster or emergency, and they were going to go there to assist and provide some assistance to the victims and the survivors. And that seemed pretty straightforward, right? Actually, if you think about it, the origins of humanitarian action was many, many years ago, and it was born um, in the with the Red Cross movement and the reality that was being experienced in the battlefield with all these soldiers being wounded and nobody taking care of them. So essentially, the origins of humanitarian action was to provide some medical assistance, and then that evolved into something more. And now it's, of course, has become something extremely complex. It's like a a big monster, a big machinery that is very difficult to understand. But anyway, the point being that as the movement continued to evolve, we started noticing that delivery and the provision of service was not as easy as we thought, and there were so many different layers of complexities that were way beyond our ability to understand. So that's why I started doing this research, this particular research on how can we guarantee that we are abiding and behaving and doing things according to what the local needs are. That concept of need, you are going if you take more courses with me, particularly in humanitarian action, that is going to be one of the main themes that we will talk about. But essentially, we know now that we have to abide by and obey and follow the rules of the local systems. Now, how do we know that we are doing that correctly? And that is the big question that we have. And so, in all my research, I've been using one particular framework that is institutional logics, and I don't want to bore you with that, but essentially, when we are discussing this connection between those of us that are external actors and we are going towards some place that has been impacted, and then we start, that relationship with the local systems, how do we do to relate to that system? And originally, it was thought that it was just a matter of speaking the same language. I ask a question, what do you want? And my counterpart responds, and then I collect that data and information, and then I just provide the assistance. Now, this particular theoretical framework and I invite you to explore it and read some of my work to understand it more deeply. But it has to do with the fact that we all, regardless of where you are, all people around the world, we are driven by what is called symbolic constructions. So essentially, when we are discussing certain ideas, like the idea of the family or the government or the market and the company, we believe that we are talking about the same thing because we know what that means. But essentially, what we have in the back of our head is very different depending on who you are talking to. So the more different that you are from the other person, even though you both understand the concept of the family, we are going to, essentially the ideas behind that concept is very different, and that makes all the difference in the world, particularly at the time of providing assistance. And that concept, that symbolic construction, is affected by three different levels of tension. One is that I have my own set of values, and I believe what I want to believe, essentially. But then in this world, in this discipline, we are also affected, and we have to abide by the rules and the regulations and the values of our employer. So it's not the same if you are working for the American Red Cross or Save the Children or the United Nations. And there is another layer, which is, society in its more abstract conceptualization. So essentially, the Red Cross, even though it's a movement and it has its own values, the American Red Cross is going to be very different from the Red Cross of Thailand. I don't know. So that is why the idea of localization and working with the local systems and connecting with those systems is so incredibly difficult. With this, I finished this recording. I hope in these few minutes I managed to at least spark some interest in exploring this type of theoretical frameworks that sometimes are extremely difficult to understand, but are definitely very powerful, and it will open up your mind in different ways. Thank you so much for watching. Stay well.